All right, well, thanks for coming this afternoon. Really appreciate you here. I love coming to events like this, these symposiums and conferences, and I get so energized by them, and hopefully you are. I know it's the end of the day. Been a lot of information you've gotten, and like I said, I really appreciate that you've come to this session this afternoon to share with us and be with us and listen to what we have to say. My name's David Pearce. I'm a Ames Research Associate. Ames Center for Science and Math Education is located right here on Fresno Pacific campus if you haven't been to any of the other presentations during the day. In fact, the building across campus that some of the presentations have been in is part of our building that we work out of. Wonderful building to work in, wonderful place to work with, great people working there. Presenting with me today is Jason Chamberlain. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jason. I'm also a research associate at Ames, and we started the research division about 3 years ago, and been reading a lot of research, and been learning so much about how children think, and then taking that to the classroom and starting to work with teachers. So good to be here. Glad you guys are here.
Great, great. And we are on Twitter, so Ames at Ames ED will hook us up at Ames ED, and also if you hashtag the Early Math Symposium and Ames Thinking, we'll see those hashtags. And as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, you need us to slow down, review, go back, say it a second time, slower and louder, whatever it takes, let us know, and we're willing to do that. If you want to, at Ames ED, shoot a question out, we have another colleague here, Tiffany Friesen, who is, I know it says EDU up there.
Do the Ames Thinking.
Ames Thinking will come to you, and we'll catch those questions too. And if we don't get a chance to answer them during the presentation, we'll get back to you and answer them after the presentation also. Just getting a quick pulse of what we have here today. Preschool teachers, how many of you are preschool teachers?
Set that on his notes.
Or administrators in preschool? Kindergarten teachers, we have any kindergarten, first grade? How about second grade or elementary administration? And others? We'll lump you in that category. Others, awesome. We really don't know what that means, but that's fine. Green one, right? Our work that we've been doing at Ames, and I'm part of the research division, comes from this gentleman's work. That's our main person that we focused on, Dr. Les Steffi out of the University of Georgia. And he's been working with children for over 30 years. And Zach earlier had a presentation, his main speech, about talking less and listening more. And this gentleman has spent 30 years listening to children and what they have to say and how they think. And his whole purpose has been to try to understand the cognitive development of children as they learn mathematics. And then our work has been, so how do you take that research and take it into a classroom and have teachers use that research in their teaching? And so we've been working in those areas as we go through this. That listening to children is so important to us, listening to what they're doing. And as I said, he's done this for 30 years, and his research is all about what do children say, so what does that mean about how they think, and where does that put them in their development of mathematics? We're going to want you to get a little neighborly here, okay? So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'm going to have you ask and have conversations with the people around you as we go through this. So this first one, I'm going to have you turn to somebody, one of your elbows, and you're going to talk to them. Introduce yourself if you don't know each other, where you're from, what brought you here today, or yesterday, in order to come to this symposium. And then I'd like to have a conversation. And the name of our presentation was, using student thinking, but this idea of subitizing and using that subitizing for additive thinking in additive situations. So first question I just want to throw out is, what is subitizing? So turn to one of your elbow partners there, introduce yourself if you don't know each other, and have a quick conversation on this. All right, some great conversations going on here, and I just want to hear some of this thinking. And I heard your explanation, what you thought it was. I'd love if you could share with the whole group. What do you picture? What do you think subitizing is?
What I think is that a child has instant recognition of objects. So if there's 3 dots know it's 3. Or if they're looking at a dice and they see a 6, they know it's a 6. Or in a 10 frame, if they see 8, they don't have to count, but they just know it's 8.
They just know it. Any other thoughts on this that I'd like to share out? I said I heard some great conversations going on. So we teach subitizing in our classrooms, and we hold up the cards. This is 6. We do all this. So the next question, I want you to turn to another neighbor this time. Introduce yourself, where you're from, what brought you here today, but why subitize? Why? So it felt a little quieter in here. I don't know if we always know why we do this, do we? Why do we teach subitizing? What does it help them with? Just real quick, and I just want you to hold up fingers. What do you think is the largest value children can subitize? What's that largest value they can subitize? Show me on your hands real quick. Up. Now, come on, everybody. Hands up. 5, 10, 6, 3, 10, just 6. And maybe it depends on age and how much experience they have and where they're at. And so, conceptual subitizing as opposed to perceptual subitizing. And there's a lot involved in that question, right? Yeah. So we've been talking about subitizing, and one of the things we hope you leave with today is you have a richer understanding of why children subitizing and how it can be beneficial for them, specifically in additive situations, when they're working with additive situations. But before I go further into subitizing, I just want to kind of take a step back and think about what do we work with children at the different levels. So in preschool, I'm going to jump there. In preschool, what are the ideas that we work with? And a lot of times, with preschool children, we want to make sure they have a number word sequence. It's got to be a stable number word sequence. They know that those words 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the correct order. We get all types of things when we work with children. 1, 2, blue, 7, 9. Got to have that stable number word sequence. Then also, they need to know what to count. They got to be able to determine objects to actually count and pick those out, and then coordinate those two things together. The number word with an object to count, and that one-to-one correspondence. So in a lot in preschool, that's a lot what you see being developed. Do they have that one-to-one correspondence? Can they count in a stable number word sequence as they work through this? And then we move them on to kindergarten. In kindergarten, we present them with situations like this. This might be a worksheet they get. So just think a moment. What do they have to do? How are they going to complete a problem that looks like this? What do they really need to complete that problem? Maybe just counting, right? Counting's important. Counting's very important in the development of mathematics. In order to do this, objects are there. If they have that number word sequence, they have that one-to-one correspondence, they know what to count. Maybe it's just counting they're doing here. And we move them on to first grade. Something that looks like this. How would they complete a problem that looks like this in first grade? Nothing to count there, right? So what's missing between kindergarten and first grade? What happens between there? Or what has to happen in between there? What do we expect them to understand in first grade if this is what we're giving them in kindergarten? And so our goal for them is to progress from concrete counters that we start them with to this abstract number where it's just a symbol, and somehow they're supposed to be adding these together. And that gap is actually a canyon for young children. It's a gap that is difficult for many of them to traverse. And so how do we do that? How do we get them to that point? So think about additive situations. If you work with early children, and Jason and I have worked with early children, and that's what we do, preschool through second grade we're working with, and you give them a situation where you want them to combine some sets, right? So maybe we give them this. Well, there it is. And so they'll do what with that? Probably count them, especially the younger, right? They haven't subitized it. They don't know the name for that. They'll count that out. And then you tell them, okay, now I'll give you this. How much is this all together? Preschool teachers, kindergarten teachers, you've probably seen this, right? Where they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you sit there and you go, and 1, 2, 3. How much all together? You've experienced that? And they say 5 and 3. They don't have that goal to put them together yet. I count this, I count this. What's the answer? Well, it's 5 and it's 3. And we want to pull them together into one set. We want to get them to go and make one collection out of these two separate collections. Isn't that what addition is talking about? Pulling these two sets together as we do this? And that's the base of what they need to understand. So the first thing is they got to set the goal just to join or combine the two sets together. Well, we've done at least one thing with them where in play they're doing this and it becomes exciting for them. So if you've been to some of the other math presentations by Ames, the other Ames presentations, there's a spatial reasoning one and the other one was mathematics at play. They presented this game that they haven't worked with, and they had reasons for presenting this activity, and the cards and dice are on your table for this. So if you went to the spatial reasoning one, they talked about, well, this is all about body movement, and they're learning spatial reasoning around themselves and their peers and who they're with, and mathematics to play. It's a game to play. They enjoy it. They love it. We want to focus in on the counting part of this. So on your tables, you have some cards there, and all they are is, these are pictures of kids we worked with. You can make these yourself, and we slapped on some activities for them to do. So we're going to have you hold up a card, and one of your partners there at the table is going to pull a card, and that's the activity you're going to do. And then we have some dice, and the dice on your table, we have different things. Dot patterns, finger patterns, even some numbers on here. But the key is they need to count. And we want them counting. And the number of dice we might hold off on initially, especially the really young kids. Just put the dot patterns on there. Or just put the finger patterns on there. And let's think about what happens here. So if they're going to clap above their head, say. And so they get that card and one of the kids rolls the dice. And here we go. So what are they going to do? They're going to have to count the dice, right? And maybe they count each dot on that die. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hopefully they continue their count. Maybe it becomes 1, 2, 3 again, and then you have to talk about joining those two sets. But now they get the activity, they get to clap their hands 10 times or 9 times. I can't add anymore. Above my head. 9 claps. And what do they do when they're clapping their hands? They're counting again. 1, 2, 3. So counting, 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 and introducing these subitizable patterns for them. I mean, some of the dice, we said, even have finger patterns on them. So what do you think a young child's going to do when they roll a finger pattern? Maybe they'll count the fingers on the dice. A lot of times we see them do what? Represent or, bring it up, imitate what they see. And then count them. So first they have to create that, and then they have to count it. But again, subitizable patterns, right? Fingers are subitizable patterns, these finger patterns we see. Dot patterns are those subitizable patterns. But they're getting chances to count those patterns. Not just see them and say the name with them. We want them to also count them. And then they do the activity. I'd like you to try this real quick. So somebody at your table, grab the card, someone else pull one. Roll a couple of dice, do one activity, two activity. We'll give you a minute here just to play a little. But think about how much counting has to be done in that. I know, we'll play this for the next hour if I don't stop you now, right?
How's a kid going to count that?
So kids love playing this game. From our spatial reasoning earlier, they learn about their body, they learn about other things, but then also they're counting, and they're counting these subitizable patterns. But we also put out some dice with number on them. So what happens if they roll a number? And they're counters. Especially preschool, kindergarten, even some of our first grade, they're counters. That's how they figure out mathematics, is they're counting. What do they count? They don't have some type of something to bring up from themselves, some type of subitizable pattern. What do they count? What does 5 mean to them? And Jason here, I'll take you to our blog site later, wrote a great blog on specifically 5, but all the things that go into building the concept of 5 for a kid. But if they have a spatial pattern, they might look at that number and imagine that dot pattern and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then maybe they imitate the finger pattern and keep counting 7 or 6, 7, 8. Again, I can't count. It must be in the afternoon, Friday afternoon. Or maybe they have a finger pattern for 5 because they have enough experiences and they know 5. And 5 is one that kids do pick up fairly quickly. So they pop up that finger pattern for 5. They pop up that finger pattern for 3, and then they count them to see how many it is. And then they make the animal sounds, right? 8 of them? Not one. Not one. So before we go any further, I just want you to think about what's familiar that you've heard so far in here. You know this. You're familiar with it. And what's new or a little different for you? Just share at your tables.
All right, great conversation. Thanks, you guys, for that. Thanks, David. Now, I worked with preschool kids last year, so 3 and 4-year-olds. I was talking to some of the ladies in this group about that. And then this year I've been working with kindergarten. So these are my guys, a little pride going on here. Now, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Dawn.
Say it again.
Dawn.
Dawn mentioned that even in preschool level, what a wide variety of kids you have, from very low performers to very high performing. And you're going to see these guys in the video. We're more toward the higher end. Okay, so I want to be realistic about that. But what you'll see, what you might notice in this video, and at any time if you want us to slow down or stop, I might even replay the video. What you'll see is Victoria had used the dice before, but she'd used the dots and the fingers, and I slid a numeral dice in because they wanted, they were using 2 dice, and so one of the boys said, "Can we use 4?" So they wanted to use 4 dice. So that's their goal right away. That's a pretty cool thing. It's not my idea, their idea. I said, well, how about if we use 3? Is that okay with you guys? I'm like, oh yeah, we'll use 3. So there we are, and they have 3 dice, and one of them was a numeral dice, which Victoria had never seen before. And so you're going to see what she does. She counts some dots or fingers, looks at that numeral dice, and it's a 3, and she's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She just counts because it's one thing. Makes perfect sense. And so she just hadn't had experience with it. The good thing is she had experience with subitizing. So Frank, the little boy next to her, you'll see him, his next turn, and he gets those, and he always shakes them real big, and he throws them out there, and there's a 3 on his, and he counts, and he sees that 3, and he says, well, 1, 2, sees that 3, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And she is just intently watching him. And so on the very next game, she's on the other side of the table, you will see her, as she gets a 2, a numeral 2, she counts the other things, gets to that, and you'll see her just like pause and freeze. And I just think in her mind, she's going like, I can use this pattern I have. And she goes and counts. That was just, I'm the teacher, super exciting for me. So let's take a look, and then I can play it again if you'd like. Here's Victoria and Frank.
Whoa, what do you have? Okay. Okay, so what's 1?
4, 5. What's this? I didn't
Wow.
Yay!
That's a lot.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.
That's a 9.
No, but she got 7. That's because changing the number. 7.
Oh. So I don't know if I set that up well enough. Raise your hand if you'd like me to play it again. Okay. That was the next game. Yeah, they had moved around to the other side of the table. One of the kids had left the game. So talk at your table. What did you notice from that? I know it was kind of quick and the first time you had seen it. I'll be happy to play it again, but just talk about what you saw and what you think might have happened in that mind.
Just count across.
All right, anybody like to share anything they noticed? Well, let's just talk about counting in general, because we want kids to see these patterns and to count them. So what are some types of patterns that could count? Well, dice, of course, fingers. Those come in very handy later, because when you want to count something that's around you, you can look around and fingers are always attached. Works out really well for them. Some people use reckon recs in the classroom. Kids can count those. They make a nice noise too. That audible sound is another way they can count. 5 frames, 10 frames, pictures. This is a little piano that a colleague has, and a little kid's piano. And if you play a note or 2 or 3, they might be able to subitize. Are you ready? See if you can subitize this. How many? 3. So kids can learn at first. If you run them together too fast, it might be a little tough for them, but they can learn to subitize patterns. I've actually, a kindergarten kid, I was doing a problem. I don't know, Grace might remember this. This is Grace, my colleague over here. And it was maybe, there's 7 cookies and you have 4 more cookies, and how many altogether? And I remember him going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so he wasn't sure, and he clicked his mouth. And when I said 1 through 7, he was actually doing that in his mind. And he clicked his mouth. And so I said, well, what'd you do? He said, well, I was just counting 4. And he went. So for him, that was useful. Not for every kid, not always beneficial. But again, it's something else to count and get a better understanding of the concept of a number word. Those concepts become stronger as they count a variety of things. And then little number books you have on your table. Those are very, very powerful. The blue one is the 1 through 10, and kids have a chance to see a numeral. And I was talking with this group about 3-year-olds, and they may not know numerals, so they can see the numeral and actually trace it. Get used to seeing the visual, saying the word, tracing the numeral with their finger, so then they can begin to write it before long. Seeing a pattern and actually tapping out and counting that pattern. So one little book like that is pretty powerful. So going forward, if you have a child that starts to recognize patterns. Now, I didn't say the child could pull them up on their own, but they can start to recognize them. How might we move that child from, remember that kindergarten worksheet? with the soccer balls, where all they had to do is tap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to that first grade worksheet where now they're just numerals. And if they don't have access to anything to count, they're lost. Well, we're going to go through a little progression here. Might be, it is from our research and our work with kids, very helpful for children in being able to use subitizing as a powerful tool to move them from concrete to abstract counting. Part of it, quite simply from our research, it seems simple, but for me it was like this shocking thing. You just hide stuff. And I know that's it's a very complicated vocabulary word, but just hide stuff. So what if a child were to, and you can use dice, but you can use ladybugs or blocks or whatever you have available. What if you say, can you count out 5 for me? And the child counts out 5, or you put it better yet, you show them a pattern. Say, can you copy this and count it? And they have it there in front of them. And they've counted it. And then you hide it. So they've had that experience with it. They could recognize that pattern from what they just did. And then you put something else out there. You ask them, how many? With that recent experience, they might just be able to, because they just did it, 30 seconds ago, they might be able to remember what was there if they're starting to recognize those patterns. And so maybe able to count over the top of that and then count the rest. And so next step might be, you can be creative. Like I said, don't just use dice. Those are pretty boring. That's just what I'm using for the presentation here. Second step might be, what if you hide the second one? So hide that first one, but then go ahead and hide the second one. So they count out the first one, you hide it. They count out the second one, you hide that. So they've had experience with both, but you're kind of stepping up the rigor just a little bit and starting to pull away from that concrete just a little bit more. Now, you will see children that aren't ready for this, because you'll say, okay, little Dawn, can you count out 5 ladybugs for me? And she does this. She throws them in a big pile. That's a pretty good indicator, probably doesn't have a real strong 5 pattern. And so when you hide it, they're gone forever, unless she just wasn't showing you that, and that happens too. Same thing with a 4. If they just pile up 4, now they're lost. Not for every child. They may have a finger pattern, or they may have just been messing with you, but it's a pretty good indication. On the other hand, if they create patterns, you can be pretty sure that they're going to be able to access those again. So here's the first time we talked about recognizing a subitizing pattern. That's kind of where they were there. They could recognize, and they just did it. So at this point, here's where the real power of subitizing comes in. So this is the first time that a child will not be able to count. You just say, there are 5 bears under this box or cloth or whatever you have there. Just tell them there are 5. Then what happens if they don't have a pattern? It doesn't really mean anything to them. So what is something that they might do there? Look confused, right? They may very well look confused because 5 doesn't have a meaning with the pattern. And then, so you could count and hide the other out. And now if they have access to a pattern, they can bring up a 5 from their mind on their own. And that's where that real power of that subitizing and knowing that a pattern matches a number word. And you know what? If they tell me 5, I have this great tool and I can count this thing as a 5. Or I might be able to touch the table or the cloth or the box in front of me and count a 5 pattern. And that's really, really powerful as you start moving more and more toward that abstract. So just want to take a pause right here and talk at your table or write anything. What is familiar to you from this progression, and what's kind of new and might be helpful for your children. So feel free to talk and write any notes.
Yeah, you got 7 somewhere there.
All right, thank you guys. Conversation. Let's try, this is going to be a little tough for some of you, but let's try taking our adult hat off, our teacher hat off, and becoming a child. For some of you, that's very difficult. For some of us, that's very easy. But so what we're going to do is, if you could, exit number world right now. So we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the numbers. Try to just put them aside if you can. I know that's really hard. Are you there yet? You don't remember what that word number means, do you? Right, you're already there. And we're going to enter letter world. Now we're going to be working with letters, and we're going to count some letters. So you guys ready to do some counting? Okay. Let's just start by, singing the counting song, or doing the rote count, some people call it, right? We're going to count with letters. You ready? All right, let's do this. A, B,
C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J.
That's good enough. That's pretty good. How about we do that? Let's do that with our fingers. How about that? So you guys ready? Put your fingers up. Let's go. And A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. All right, are you in letter world firmly now? Okay. All right, let's try this. So we're going to try to think back. We're children. And I'm going to give you a letter, which is also a number. This many. Okay? This many. So how many is that? Can you say that letter? J. That's J. So there are J cookies underneath this cloth. I don't want you to use your finger. In fact, sit on your fingers and don't even think about it. Yeah, go ahead. You don't have to sit on, but don't use your fingers. This is part of it. So don't use your fingers. And so there are J cookies under that cloth, and guess what? There are F more cookies over on this side under that cloth. Without using your fingers, stand up when you're ready to say how many cookies are under both cloths. You should have it by now. And hopefully you're in letter world, because we forgot about numbers. Yeah, that's hard, isn't it? Okay, so how many of you kind of used your fingers? You couldn't help it. Yes, we got 2 honest people. That's awesome. I couldn't help it either. So what we're going to think of here is, as kids have 2 collections that they want to put together. They have J and F, just like they might have 8 and 4. And so with 8, some of them can count to 8. Some of them might count on. And I'm guessing you guys are all going to be alphabet counter owners. Anybody know what comes after J? Okay, you're alphabet counter owner. Okay, so if you can go like, and I have to get a run at it. I might say like H. Never mind, I better back up more. G, H, I, J, K. Okay, I went right past it. So the J, right? I have to get this running start to get there. But most of you are going to be counting on. So there are J cookies and F more. And that's really hard for me to understand, because I'm new to letter world as a child. Just like one of your children or students is new to number world, and they don't know what to do with that. But what if? You guys ready to do some subitizing? Look at this. Say this number with me. This is F. Ready? Say it with me. F. And let's count these. I don't have a laser pointer, but let's count these starting over here. Ready? Go. A.
B, C, D, E, F.
How many? F. Let's count that on our fingers. Ready? A, B, C, D, E, F. Take a good look at those fingers. Yeah. All right. Now let's see if you can do this. On the table in front of you, Can you remember what you saw and tap on the table and count to F with that same pattern? Try that. That's very interesting because I see kids do that. Some people were just tapping in like this and counting to F, and some people are using the pattern to count to F. That's a big deal for children. Because if we go back to this side is what is monitored. In other words, once I'm to J, I can't just go, okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, A, B, C, D, E, F. I don't know how many are all together. So I have to use this F mini to monitor more. Let's try that again. Can you count how many there are all together using your subitizing pattern that you learned for F? Try that. Raise your hand if you were kind of successful. I'm expecting about 2 hands. Kind of successful on that. Okay. I saw somebody go, I think she might have backed up just a little bit and got a running start and then said maybe like H-I-J, and she said K-L-M-N-O-P. Is that pretty close? Yeah. So there were some successes there. I know this is new and it's hard to think like a child. Kids need patterns to be able to move forward and add on to something. That's what they use. So some kids might use fingers for that. Some kids might use a pattern like some of you use. Some might use the clicks, like the boy I was working with used his mouth to click a number. So anyway, we'd like to do more with that, but that's about all we have time for today. Okay. All right, so just reflecting on some of the things we've talked about today. Most teachers have used subitizing in their class, flash the cards, and kids will learn to say 4, 5, 2, and different numbers. How might you use it differently in your classroom? So maybe take a couple minutes to reflect on that, and then we'll go from there. All right.
Whatever it is.
Hopefully you guys came away with something that will be helpful in moving those children from this perceptual counting, whether they're starting in preschool. If you're in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, even second grade, we worked with children, students at all those different levels that have been in that place where they can just count things that they can see and hopefully bridge them to the point where they can count abstractly or see numerals and move that along. So we have quite a few resources on our website. So that is aimsedu.org, and anything we have from the conference be available on the website. Feel free to visit that. There are some different resources like the dice patterns, some of those. Also, you could print those out and put them in they have the big dice that have slots in them. You could slide those in there and use those. A lot of different resources on the website. We also, during the college school year, we have a colloquium series. You'll follow that online. We have a podcast and a blog that comes out daily. And so there are some different levels, so depending on what level you're at, there's a preschool blog and kind of a kindergarten, first grade blog. So you can kind of look into those and find what works for you. Some pretty good stuff on there. And any questions, comments? You guys it's the end of the day. And yes?
We were looking through the numbers and we noticed that the 3 was set up like a pyramid versus the diagonal weights on a dice.
Yes.
I was wondering the thought behind that.
So-
Is it intentional?
The question is, if you look in the little number book, the blue little number book, there's a 3, and it's set in a pyramid as opposed to a diagonal. What do you guys think? They're asking, was it intentional? Do you think it matters one way or the other? What would you kind of be thinking there?
You're trying to fix the pattern of having 2 columns or 2 rows, so maybe that's why. So maybe rows on the other numbers, so that's
Okay, so it kind of puts it in the middle there. Is that what you're saying? Like just for format? Yeah.
I think they should be exposed to different ways because it's still 3. Whichever one, when they create, there'll be something that they're comfortable with. Like most of us are probably domino or dice patterns because it's just simple and we remember it, but they don't have that yet.
I'm trying to get back to this slide here. Oh no, we shut down the computer. There is a shutdown button on this. Remember the slide with all the different things you can count on there? A lot of different things, and counting in different ways. And so with 3, and what she said, I don't know if you heard her, is that they will find something that they're comfortable with and be able to use that pattern to pull up in their mind and use that when they're counting. So just mind, go ahead.
I would say a variety is important, though.
Variety definitely is important.
Definitely, because you'll have those children that this is 3, but this isn't 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in middle school classrooms where I'll do this, and I'll get those looks like, what the heck are you doing there? That's not 3. And they're 7th, 8th graders because they've just never seen 3. Their 3s are fixed into certain patterns. Variety of patterns helps them to understand the 3-ness to all those different objects.
Did that kind of address the question? Okay, perfect. So maybe to answer it fully, Grace, was that intentional?
I created these years ago, so it wasn't intentional. Really, the goal was to have them see the representation in as many ways as possible.
All right. Thank you, guys. Let me see if I can pull this last slide up here. Well, that's not the one I wanted. There we go. Okay, so we have email, and it's on your packet there, but email addresses. Please contact us. If you have ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Questions, comments, love to stay in touch. So thank you guys very much for coming today.